He who wants to be first of all will be last of all and servant of all. Gentlemen, you are in the right place. This is Last in Line Leadership Podcast. I am your host, John Shibley, and I just read you from Mark 9:35. That scripture is all about servant leadership, and that's what we're about here. The podcast that showcases and highlights great leaders of faith, people who have walked the journey of leadership, who have served, who have sacrificed, who have developed discipline, courage, and resilience. You've come to the right place. This is Last in Line Leadership. Hey, I'd like to welcome Chris Allen to Last in Line podcast. Chris is the founder and managing partner of Always About People. He has worked with leaders across diverse industries and sectors who have all benefited from his passion, experience, and practical insights. Chris is a trusted advisor and consultant who has helped multiple organizations create a cultural clarity necessary for their phase of growth, their next phase of growth as it applies to their business. When it comes to scaling a business into the next phase, Chris' transformational leadership approach continues to breed success. He is a native of Chicago, but lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's got 20 plus years of experience with rapidly growing organizations. Chris is a coach. He is a CEO, managing partner. He is a family man, husband and father. But we talk about coaching. We talk about discipleship. We talk about building culture from a faith perspective. We talk about his faith journey, a lot of the things that has allowed him to build the skill set of coaching and leading other people who obviously have a goal of growth and kind of pushing beyond their limits and realizing potential. He and his team have had tons of success, and I think you're going to like the conversation we have. Chris is very genuine, very transparent, and authentic when it comes to just being a down-to-earth guy who loves people and likes to see them win. And so he's got a template. He's got a standard by which he accomplishes these goals with these organizations. And he, Chris has figured it out. And we talk about how others can figure it out as well. So with that, help me welcome Chris Allen from alwaysaboutpeople.com to Last in Line Podcast. Chris Allen, hey, welcome to Last in Line Podcast. Glad we could connect, man.
It is so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, yeah, man, I love mutual friends and I love connections, and the enemy almost didn't want this to happen, but we persevered, and what's made you successful is kind of beating your head against that wall till it comes down, and we made it happen. So we carved out some margin in your day, which I know you're a busy guy. You're waist deep in coaching and leadership training and culture development, leadership development, like all of that. And even better, the foundation of what you stand for is in Christian worldview space, and you're preaching to the choir here. So, welcome to Last in Line, and we're all about servant leadership. I mean, it was born right out of the Bible, Mark 9:35, where it says, he who wants to be first of all will be last of all and servant of all. And so I feel like servant leadership's gotten lost in the shuffle, and in an age that is so focused on being the tip of the spear. While that's important, I think we lose sight of equipping and empowering other leaders to maybe even, legacy planning, succession planning, those kinds of things, and empowering people to be leaders themselves. So I guess so I'll shut up and let you have the floor. Give us a little background and just kind of like maybe some cool leadership stuff you learned from along the way growing up, kind of your faith journey. Let's start there.
Yeah, cool. Well, even in your introduction, you got me all excited talking about how servant leadership may be a little watered down. I know that those weren't your words, but we'll get into that. So I think maybe I'll start by just saying I grew up as a pastor's kid in the Chicago area. So I figured out how to dress the part, talk the part. I knew all the answers to the questions, and soccer was a major part of my life. At that time, I played pretty competitively, was recruited out of high school, and a knee injury my senior year in high school, as I was being recruited, helped me to reprioritize everything. And it was through, again, not that complicated of a knee injury. It was cartilage, but it it reprioritized my thought process on where I wanted to go with my life. And I ended up being recruited to Indiana University, went down there on my recruiting trip, and it just wasn't where I was supposed to be. And it was almost as if I felt God was saying clearly, you need to be in a healthy environment. So I went to Wheaton College in the Chicago suburbs. I played soccer at Wheaton for 4 years, majored in Christian education and business. That's a story that I'll come back to. Met my wife at Wheaton, and then had the opportunity to actually play soccer after college, which brought me to Charlotte, North Carolina, where we've lived for the last 20 plus years. Let me go back to what happened in college. My dad was the pastor, as I mentioned before. My uncle was in business, and I feel like I was sort of a cross between both of them, that I had a passion for ministry and a passion for business, and I didn't fit well in either box. And so at Wheaton, education for ministry, and then had this real passion for business. And so added that to the curriculum. And as a 19-year-old, really felt like this intersection of faith, work, business, and kind of the secular world was where I really wanted to spend my time, specifically around developing leaders. And so fast forward again, I come to Charlotte, North Carolina, and my career has taken a number of different pathways across industries, between nonprofit, church, and business. Spent some time on staff with a large church here in Charlotte. Also helped build a large mortgage company here. And most people would think, how do all those things come together? And I would say, I've done the same thing in every organization I've ever been a part of. I develop people, and that's what I do. And so after my time at the large mortgage company, which we grew pretty quickly, I then realized, gosh, I want to help other organizations do the same thing. So I launched my own consulting practice. It's called Always About People. And we help to create cultures where people thrive. I believe that the biggest issue right now in the workplace is that we don't understand the needs of people. And leaders right now are not equipped to meet the needs of people. This is why we're seeing the turnover, the quiet quitting, the great resignation, the statistics around engagement. And I have a vision to see that changed. And so that's what drives me every day. I believe that if we're going to spend more waking hours at work, we might as well make people better as a result of it, not worse. And so it's my life purpose. It's my calling. And I guess that's maybe a little bit longer story than you wanted, but there you go.
No, we need that. We need to know kind of behind the curtain, because it'll help, bring a little clarity and context to some of the things we talk about, because we know where your heart is, where your passion is. I mean, I say all the time, and I know I didn't invent this, but if you can't align your gifts with your passion, most likely you will identify your mission and your purpose. If those can align and God's behind the situation, like you can really, you get kind of a down, a tailwind, and you get momentum, and it becomes your life's mission. It's a cool story. I mean, I don't know what it is. I have never, aside from childhood, really played soccer. I mean, a lot of respect for those guys, because in college I played a little indoor, and it's the stamina it takes, man. Hats off to you guys. But I've had like 3 or 4 soccer guys that have either played serious college soccer or like semi-pro, pro. I mean, it's weird. I don't know how I gravitate toward you. I guess you call it football guys, right?
That's what the rest of the world
Yeah,
calls it. I mean, it does make sense that you would use your feet and a
football.
ball.
That's
And
right.
so, the rest of the world makes fun of us Americans for calling American
That's
football.
right.
But
That's right.
anyway,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think it's cool. I don't know how it wasn't intentional, but now we are the home of professional soccer players here at Last in Line. Um, well, I have a kind of a quirky little thing we do at the beginning. Now that we kind of know a little about you, we're going to peel back the onion a little more, what I call a life sentence.
hmm,
And I'm going to give you a couple sentences. You're going to complete them for me just from your
cool.
perspective, kind of how it applies to your life. And so we'll just jump right in. They're not heavy. So you can
I
take
can
a
handle it.
breath.
I can
You can
handle it. All
breath.
right.
Yeah. A defining moment in my leadership journey was.
I think through making a mistake, and one defining moment that I think specifically was um, having to ultimately have a conversation with somebody who didn't fit on the team, and honestly asking God the night before to give me the wisdom to know what to say, and waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning with the exact vision, communication, and words to speak to handle the situation. And in that moment, believing, you know what? He asks us to bring our request to him.
Yeah.
It's actually true. And so even when it comes to wisdom in business, going before the Lord and asking for wisdom on how to even handle a conversation, that God will do it. And so I would just say that in my journey, that's a specific defining moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess a part B to that too, now that you're saying that makes me ask, what do you feel like God is kind of refining in you most right now when it comes to maybe leadership or just developing a winning culture with the clients you work with?
Hmm. Well, I'm actually going to answer it from the perspective of always about people, because we're building our own organization with team members. And in my own journey of leadership, what I'm learning is where I am best gifted. So I think many leaders and entrepreneurs, when you start something, you have to take on all the roles. But as you gradually build a team, you realize, man, it's not practical for me to
Mm,
do everything. Where can I add the most value? And I think many entrepreneurs think of it through the lens of the team members. Where will this team member add the most value? But if we're not as leaders also asking ourselves the same question. So I'm in a refining process now of saying, okay, where can I add the most value within my own team? And how do I uh, build and develop talented people around me to cover where I'm not great?
mm,
And I'm in the process of still figuring that out.
yeah. No, you can't scale it if you're doing it all by yourself, right? It's hard to scale the organization. Growth is hard to quantify if you're in the middle of everything. You don't have enough hands. So no, that's good, man. I always used to when I was in leadership for a brief stint. Professional leadership, I guess, vocational leader. I realized that hiring against my weakness was the best way to go. Like where I'm deficient, find somebody that's not, and that's actually their strength. So I don't know if that's even a thing anymore, but it seems like talent chases talent, which is great, but almost talent almost chases the same kind of talent, which
Yeah.
then you've got a room full of you, which isn't what you're looking for most likely. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. Well, that's actually really interesting. That brings us to a whole nother conversation. But we tend to be surrounded by people who are like us, and we tend to be in circles with people who um, are like us and tend to also look like us.
Mm,
So in the greater conversation, which is a much longer conversation than we have time for, the idea of surrounding yourself with people who don't have personalities like you, don't think like you, don't have backgrounds like you, don't maybe have the same skin color as you do,
mm,
hair color as you do, generation as you do. That's true, God-given diversity, not the diversity that we talk about most often in our secular circles. And true cognitive diversity is a God-given blessing. The
Mhm.
manifold wisdom of God is shown forth when we are in a diverse context.
Yeah.
But yet we tend to think of diversity as a sliver. And the reality is there are all kinds of ways of surrounding ourselves. So yes, it starts with who am I surrounding myself with? But it's also realizing the bias that I have to be surrounded by people who probably talk like me, act like me, think like me, look like me. And how do I get out of that? That's the question.
Yeah. Yeah. No, well said. I'm glad you added that. And, ironically or not, if we went by biblical standards, it talks about the body of Christ, and the elbow doesn't need to be a foot and the
Yeah.
ear doesn't need to be a mouth, right? I mean, there's all these parts that actually benefit the body, that they're different. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it'd be nice if most organizations operated that way, right? And established a team that way. But I'm sure that's what you're talking about, and trying to foster on your own team, let alone the ones you work with. All right, one more here on life sentence for you.
Yeah.
Um, what they don't tell you, this is you talking. What they don't tell you about leadership in school is
It's hard, and not everybody wants to be a leader. Now, well,
is so. Let me
I'll
ask you
fill in the
this. Okay,
pieces.
yeah, yeah. Let me ask you this. So, do you feel like, if you define leadership as people having influence, do you feel like everybody actually is in some form of leadership, but not everybody obviously is good at it? But would you say that everybody's a leader if we go by that
Yes.
definition?
Yes. Like everybody has influence somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Not everybody takes it intentionally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, Regardless of where your leadership and influence is, it's hard. And the reality is, most leaders find themselves in very difficult situations, wondering, why did I get myself into this? And then thinking, surely somebody else is better at this than me. That's imposter syndrome. Most
Sure.
leaders think, I'm the only one who struggles with this. And the reality is, no, every leader is wrestling with this. And if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And so the reason you find yourself up here all alone is because it's difficult. And I think that that's really interesting. Going back to that whole concept of what they don't teach you in school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I will also add what is really, really important to me, and that is they don't teach you how to understand people. So leadership becomes a set of principles, a list of things, of laws, of precepts, of great sayings, of little rhymes.
Cookie cutter.
And
Yeah.
that's right. And we go to a workshop or a program or a process and think that we've become a great leader.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, if we just understood the needs of people and how God wired his people, we would become better leaders. This actually, and whether you want to go here now, I'll drop it and then you decide whether you want to go there. But this is the problem with the term servant leader right now, is that it's become this watered down, you mentioned tip of the spear. It's just sort of something we say without really understanding what it means.
Mm-hmm.
I, I would like to change the term to shepherd leader. And I think if we can change the term, it'll stop people in their tracks to ask, what do you mean? And what I mean is that every time in the Bible it talks about leadership, it's often combined with the idea or the concept of what a shepherd does. And if we could fully understand how a shepherd cares for, protects, guides, stewards, and values sheep with a staff that is both a correction
Mm-hmm.
and a help and guidance, uh, it's a protection
Yep.
mechanism against wild animals, lions,
Mm-hmm.
and prey. Um, if we understood our role in leadership as true shepherds,
Mm-hmm.
it would change our perspective. And what shepherds understood is what the Bible also talks about, which we as people get compared to sheep most often in the Bible. And not to be offensive here, but sheep are dumb animals. And so we are honestly compared to dumb animals who need help.
Mm-hmm.
And a shepherd is to come to the rescue and the help of sheep by understanding their needs. And if we could lead and influence people that way, I think it would change the way we go about it.
No, I agree. And I think the only thing that most likely requires a thought to change that name possibly is servant has a negative connotation almost, or a weak connotation, right?
Mm-hmm.
To know to be a servant, like back in the day, was, the help basically that catered to every need and really took care of kind of the dirty jobs that nobody wanted to do. And obviously Jesus said he came to serve, not be served. So he wasn't weak. So serving isn't weak, but yet I think servant actually creates this stigma around the word. And I like that, shepherd leadership. I never thought of it that way, and shepherds do serve. Like, they protect, they serve, they nurture, they foster, and actually empower, because I would think the shepherd, once the sheep understand his voice, kind of get to go out a little further from the shepherd,
Yep.
right? Not everybody's
Yep.
underneath the shepherd within reach. And to the team analogy that you're talking about, is I think it's nice to be able to have those sheep once they start to learn and don't become so, I'll use your word, dumb. But I know you weren't talking about people, but in that sense.
Yep.
But yeah, if they can learn, they can get kind of sent off to become, I guess, shepherds in training, if you will. And
Well,
how do we
yeah.
distinguish them? Yeah.
Well, there's a couple funny things here because, and yes, to your correction, I wasn't calling anybody
Mm-hmm.
dumb, but the reality is, we can't do it on our own,
Mm-mm.
and um, by definition, we need the shepherd, big S shepherd,
Mm-hmm.
and leaders are necessary because a couple very specific things. The wool of a sheep will continue to grow. And there are some really funny examples of sheep who are not sheared.
Mm-hmm.
They will tip over and can't stand back up, and
Mm-hmm.
they will die, but for a shepherd who is caring for them, shearing the wool, etc. The shepherd, John 15, is one of the best examples. A shepherd will lay down his or her life at the gate and protect the entrance and exit for those sheep. The shepherd leads the sheep to green pasture,
Mm-hmm.
to the water, through the valley. I mean, like Psalm 23, like
Mm-hmm.
you can look at all kinds of really great examples. And if we led people the way the Bible seems to indicate shepherds should care for sheep, I think it would transform what leadership looks like.
Yeah, yeah. And for the audience listening, and for the sake of semantics, I know, but I started thinking when we were, the word dumb keeps coming to my head, but I think we both obviously mean limited, because when you started talking about that, we are limited. The sheep are limited. They need that shepherd, the capital S shepherd for us, right? And then leaders for those sheep to, like we said, expand their knowledge base, expand their capacity for leading themselves and creating that independence. Now, the shepherd doesn't just let the sheep go off where they feel like it, when they feel like it, and unsupervised, right? So there's got to be some training and some mentorship and apprenticeship, those kinds of things. Man, what do you give me an idea of some of your core values with AAP as it relates to obviously leadership, but also if you want to branch off from that too. But give us some of your core values and kind of some of the things you hone in on mostly.
Yeah. Um, so what's these are three values that are personal to me as a leader, but I use the word authentic, that what you see is what you get. Um, there, I think some of that in my upbringing as a pastor's kid, um, I can pretty much fake it if I need to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we have a lot of people faking it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be authentic at all times. The second thing for me personally is this idea of excellence, that if I'm going to put my mind and my hands to it, I want it to be excellent. I want to teach that even to my own kids. The third thing is this concept of scrappiness, that I want to be scrappy. Now, you could play into that with this idea of stewardship. You could look at it like resourceful, but the point is that I'm going to work harder than anybody at this, and I'm going to figure it out. If I don't have the answer, I don't quit. And so, one of the sayings in our family is Allen's never quit. And I want to raise up a generation that when it gets tough, that's when you just work harder. That's when you know that there's an opportunity in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
That's not when you give up.
Yeah.
So I had this funny conversation, and then I'll come back to AAP in a second. I had this funny conversation in the car last night with my 12-year-old, and we were talking about his soccer team, and his team right now has not won many games. In fact, his direct quote last night is, "Dad, I think we've lost every game." Now he's a little competitive, and we had to kind of work our way through this conversation. But I said, "Why did you join this team?" And he said, "For the community, for the coach." And his third thing was, I wanted to be in a Christian environment. And I said, that's exactly why you made this decision. Has anything in that thought process changed? Nope. No. And so we came back around to, we don't give up on something just because it gets hard or because
Mm-hmm.
we're not winning. We remember why we got into it in the beginning, and we put forth whatever effort is necessary. So I said, what could you do to make this team better? And he started talking through some things that he could do individually. And he also started thinking through, are there some of my friends in the community that I could invite to try out for this team next year? And so just reframing that thought process around this value of, hey, we don't quit. When it comes to our team here at Always About People, a lot of those same values ring true in what we do. One of the things that we talk about often is just believing the best in people. I think it's something that's severely missing in the world right now, is just this idea that, no, I'm going to believe the best. I'm not going to make up a story before I know what's going on. I'm going to believe the best. I'm going to trust you from the beginning, and there's no reason for me not to. So those would be a few things I would say outside of just the specific values. Let me give you core beliefs. The core belief that we have is that thriving for people is holistic. And right now, when you look across our world at engagement in the workplace, at health, at broken families, there are needs that human beings have that aren't being met.
Yeah.
And for a number of reasons, which we probably don't have total time to get into, our society is not meeting those needs that people have. If you want to look at one simplistic formula, you would pull up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you would say, all right, physiological needs: air, water, food, shelter. That's the most basic need. Then you have safety needs. That's security and employment is listed as a second level need. Well, then above that is love and belonging, self-esteem, and what Maslow, in the secular terms, called self-actualization.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a time culturally where love and belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization were met by other things in society: marriage, family, community, church, relationships. Well, over the last, couple of years specifically, but even more than that, we've got marriages broken, families broken, very few people going to church anymore, people locked up in their homes, no community, no relationships. And so we have people trying to meet these higher level needs some other way. And our core belief is that because people will spend more time at work, they're actually looking for work to meet needs that aren't being met anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to help create cultures where people thrive, we have to figure out what the needs are of people and then figure out how to help meet those needs through the culture of an organization. And holistic health, we say there are 6 thrive factors. It's professional health, it is family health, it's relational health, it's physical health, financial health, and spiritual health.
Mm-hmm.
And every person, whether they're a believer or not, secular organization or not, nonprofit, church, doesn't matter, people still need to meet those needs. And so our core belief is we want to come alongside organizations to help people thrive. We believe that if people are healthy in the workplace, they'll be better moms, dads, husbands, wives, sisters, brothers, community members. And that is a core belief that we uphold.
Yeah. And so what I believe, and I'm not going to speak for you, but I'm going to make a little bit of an assumption, is everything begins and ends with our spiritual health. And literally, if you're deficient or bankrupt spiritually, that's going to have a lot of tentacles into other areas of your life. So what challenges do you have working in a secular environment, given that fact that, man, you may not even be able to address that foundational belief until maybe later and they give you a green light? So how do you navigate that?
I think you gave me the answer right there at the end of your question, which is you wait for the opportunity. I don't need to force my way into that spiritual conversation. I am going to try and create a culture where even in a secular environment, we can all agree that these things are good for you.
Mm-hmm.
So your physical health, your financial health, your family, your relationships, and your professional health and development are all important. We all agree on that. Now, as you get to know me and my team or team members, and as we develop a relationship, you're going to hear more of my story. I don't even have to tell you that it's Jesus and that it's a matter of spiritual health.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that in your relationship with me, business owner, business leader, whomever, that you will begin to ask questions that I will have the opportunity to answer. And so we're waiting for the opportunities for somebody to say, this just doesn't satisfy. I mean, I've made more money than I ever thought I'd make. This still, I just don't have joy. I had a business leader tell me in May that he is a part of a group of business leaders who have all made more money than they ever thought they would need or make. They can't spend it. And every single person in this group is broken without purpose. Their marriages have fallen apart. Their families have disintegrated. And all of them have no idea or direction. And that oftentimes leads to conversations of, okay, so why are you doing what you're doing? what's all this for anyway? What's most important to you? What is your purpose? I was in a conversation earlier last week where an individual was telling the story of a business leader who sold his business for over $1 billion and had the opportunity to sell that business a couple times previously, but waited for the big payday. His answer to the question, would you have done anything differently, was, I would have sold at 50 million. It would have been all I needed, and I wouldn't have sacrificed my family in the process. So those are the conversations that we get to get into that ultimately lead to some form of a spiritual conversation, but we wait for those to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I mean, there's got to be a little bit of a level, I'd say a lot of a level of trust that you got to get on the front end before you can just dive right into that, or else you're just another one of those, people trying to change everybody.
We're not going to make everybody happy, but that also doesn't give us the right to not love people. So like a shepherd, like we still have to love people, but you can still speak the truth.
Yeah, because to me, if you're not being truthful, then that's not loving.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If we're just selling them what they want to hear, and we're kind of being tolerant or not submissive, permissive of a behavior that's not aligned with that truth, right? If we're just kind of sitting back, apathetic, that's not love.
Well, if the truth did not actually lead to a better life, we wouldn't do it. But I think the issue with most Christians is that they don't know if it's the better life. And what I would just say is, like, we're in the business of trying to help create cultures where people thrive. The person who has the best recipe for thriving is Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And thriving in Jesus is a holistic wellness in every aspect of your life. And I think most often, and here I'll go disruptive. If pastors aren't healthy, they can't lead healthy organizations. And so a pastor who is healthy and thriving in all areas of his or her life is somebody who can speak the truth, who isn't out for the favor of man, and who can point people to the main thing, which is Jesus, because they're healthy. And I think we're living in a culture right now where I brought this up in a leadership event back at Wheaton College earlier in November. But if you work your way backwards, the reason that many pastors are after the favor of man is because the way that they keep their job is through funds.
Yeah.
And funds come through people tithing and giving. And people tithe and give when they align with the message. And so you're left trying to earn the favor of a tithe check. And that's just not what Jesus was after. And yet, as I say that, I go, man, like I've wrestled through the same stuff before, John.
Of course.
So it's not like I'm not dealing with or wrestling through the same stuff. But that would be, there you go. You put me on the hot seat, so you got it.
You got it. That's good, man. It almost like we rehearsed it, but we did not, for those of you listening. But no, he did say, that he came to so that we would know the truth, and the truth is setting us free, he says. So the truth will set you free. Like, I don't know anybody that doesn't want to be free. So stop blowing smoke, I guess, is what Chris is telling all of you pastors if you're blowing smoke. No, we go back to that authenticity, right? I mean, let's be authentic. And I'm not in favor of socialized medicine necessarily, but I'd like to see where the church got from a culture and message and authenticity standpoint. If we just flat across the board socialized like their paychecks, like all pastors made the same amount of paycheck, right? And I'd like to see that for a year. Give me that for a year. Let's see if messages change, knowing that butts in seats wouldn't matter. I mean, it matters, but not matter to your income, and not necessarily be the tail wagging the dog of your message, right? So your message comes from scripture, it comes from truth, not from who am I going to run off or keep in the seat to write a check, that kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of that. I mean, you said it too, and so it's not just our thought. We didn't make that up. I think it's true, and I think it's happening a lot, unfortunately. And I mean, I have a son that's a youth pastor, brand new youth pastor right now, and he hears that from me a lot. And thankfully, we live in a healthy church environment where top down, it's not about that. It's about truth, and it's about grace, and it's about the gospel, full gospel. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate letting me go off on that tangent, because we kind of
Well,
go. Yeah, go ahead.
what's funny about this? No, what's funny about this is we 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 talk about the gospel, but we forget that it's the good news.
Sure.
So it's like the truth, the gospel is actually the good news.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that we want to speak the truth is because we believe that it's the good news, and we believe that by living in it, you actually find life, and life to the fullest. John 10:10. And I think, like, sometimes we forget that no, it's my relationship with Christ. It's in that relationship where I can find true life to the fullest. I'm not giving up things. When I'm in sin, I'm actually not experiencing God's best for my life.
Right.
And the reason that we are trying to hold people accountable and ourselves is, like, we actually believe that if the good news is truly good news, then living a life in obedience to Christ is actually more life to the fullest. That's thriving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we actually believed that, it might change our message.
Yeah. And I think if Christians also would acknowledge and engage in a spiritual battle that's going on, because there is another realm, and the Bible talks about it. If we're going to believe some of the Bible, we're going to believe it all, right? And so, in addition to what you're saying, the truth of the gospel and the freedom that comes with it, and the grace that's there. And yeah, we're not perfect, and we're going to mess up, but we come boldly to the throne of grace, and we ask forgiveness, and he has that redemption and mercy for us. But guys, if we're not acknowledging an enemy, right? Because we can have all this lined up, buttoned up, and fully pressed and pleated shirt and pants, like we can. But if we're not understanding the other realm, and I'm not trying to get super weird on anybody, but I'm just being scriptural. And so I think that guys, and specifically, this is mostly a men podcast that people listen to, this are men. For men who are the spiritual leaders of the home, if you don't get the spiritual battle under control and engage proactively and intentionally, it's gonna leave a huge vacancy in not only your life, but the people you're supposed to serve or shepherd. Do you have any instances or any thoughts maybe on spiritual warfare? And we don't have to go down super deep in that rabbit trail, but I mean, if in your life, I'm sure you've had to come up against some opposition that you attributed to some spiritual warfare.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think oftentimes I was trying to figure out, like, a couple thoughts around leadership specifically, but as a leader, that you're going to be up against spiritual warfare. Like the moment you're trying to take people towards health, towards thriving, towards Christ, is the moment you're going to battle spiritual warfare. And whether it's the critique of other people, whether it's opposition. My wife and I have a joke that it's like, anytime stuff starts breaking at home,
Yep,
we know that there's a big opportunity ahead. Cars start breaking down, they're in the shop. Air conditioning, heating breaks.
yep,
Appliances don't work. Things break in the house. carpet gets stained, vacuum cleaners don't work,
Yeah.
um, dogs start getting sick. Like it's that silly, annoying stuff.
Yeah.
Washers, dryers break. I mean, it's that stuff that starts happening, and you go, oh,
Especially
bring
when
it.
it's like clustered, right? Especially
Yep,
when it's like not just a standalone
yep,
one-off incident. Like you can tell that there's something at play. Yeah.
that's right. So, but you can often miss those in the midst of it, and so I think that there's even being in tune or in step with the
Mm-hmm.
Spirit,
Yep.
just to understand. Okay, I see clearly here. I get it. Game
Yeah.
on now. Go, oh
Yeah.
yeah, and this is where the scrappiness comes out.
So what do you recommend we do in those moments that we actually are in tune with the spirit, like you're saying, and we actually do chalk this up to something we can't see at play, a spiritual realm? What has
Mm.
led you guys to push through and break through and overcome those situations?
Yeah, well, I guess that then it becomes the armor of God,
Yeah.
and to mount up against. I think in times like that, it's been uh, surround yourselves with prayer warriors, intercessors.
Yeah.
Um, uh, be open and honest about it. Take it before the Lord, and I guess I would sum it up by draw closer.
That's
So
good.
uh, don't let those frustrations and those things actually frustrate you more, which tends to move us away from relationship with Christ, but that it would draw you deeper in to Christ, the Holy Spirit, God the Father, that as husband and wife, you'd be praying together, that you
Mm-hmm.
would get friends praying for what's about to come,
Mm-hmm.
that you would be looking and observing and being perceptive to every little thing around you,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that you would also set up some protections, because I think it's in some of that where the devil would want nothing more than to make us weak. And so for men, it's like when
Mm-hmm.
traveling,
Yep.
protect more. Um, when scrolling or watching things,
Yep.
protect more. Um, make sure that you're getting your time in the word every day, or whatever that looks like for you to get quiet. That is sacred, when most of the time people neglect that during times of frustration. And so draw
Yep.
in, not out.
That's good, man. Because if we're not understanding what is going on spiritually, we can get mad at God. We can just chalk it up to I've just, if I didn't have any bad luck, I wouldn't have any. Chalk it up to just maybe even ourselves. We start carrying this shame and this guilt, and I can't do anything right. And then we start seeping into that mentality rather than, like you said, ooh, something good is about to happen because I'm feeling the weight of this. So I'm going to get
Yep.
close to him. In fact, might even start thanking him for what we don't see yet. I've tried that, and that puts a whole different spin on your mindset to when you
Mm.
start thinking, and you start thinking expectantly instead of like doom and gloom, right? Or you start thinking about loss instead of start thinking about what's potentially out there. And so, no, I'm glad you said that. That's a great way to put that.
Well,
I
I
want,
got one
yeah,
other one other thought, John, that
yep,
you triggered. Oftentimes in a loss of control
mm-hmm,
like that, we want to grip tighter.
yep.
And I think when you realize that you're out of control and that you've lost control, let go more.
Mm-hmm. You're gonna go hydroplane analogy, aren't you? If you're in a car and you're hydroplane, you're not supposed to like slam on the brakes and like grip the
Yeah.
steering wheel super tight,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, no, that's good. I wonder how that even looks, if you've ever had anything like that show up in some of the organizational coaching and leadership development that you've done. Once you've gotten that green light, once the door's been open to a spiritual conversation, maybe even further down the field, as once they become bought into the truth and they become stronger spiritually, and now all these dots are lined up with the health and the thriving. I wonder, has that ever, I mean, it had to have been a conversation at some point. I wonder if organizational leaders within a secular environment ever even attribute
Well,
stuff to that at some point.
um, So in secular terms, when that comes up, it would be something like, um, hey, I'm watching all of this happen. We've got some clients in the real estate, mortgage,
Mm,
title industry. And as many of you know, right now in late 2023, it's not the best market for that. A number of organizations have been really struggling financially. So the tendency as a leader is to grip tighter and to try and over control everything. But the reality is you're surrounded by a team that actually wants to help you get out of this. And so one of the best things you can do is just to simply empower other leaders to help innovate, collaborate, work
mm,
together. And that tends to go against a leader's instinct, which is I got to get
yeah.
back in and grab a hold of everything and take over. And
Hmm.
so that's a very real example that happens often. Um,
Yeah.
in in a spiritual sense, I'm trying to think of a specific example, but it just becomes oftentimes it's around people leaving, and
Yeah.
instead of taking it personally, like it's a personal attack that so and so left my organization, reframing the thought process to maybe there's an opportunity that God is taking this person to. And if he's taking this person out of my organization, it must be a setup for who he's about to bring. And helping leaders understand that,
That's good.
particularly around people, is I found myself helping leaders through.
That's good, man. Well, I usually have like this super eloquent transition to close up and put a bow on stuff, and but man, I feel like we're just getting heated up and traction. But no, it's been a good conversation. I want to be respectful of your time, and I started kind of looking at your website, of course, and I didn't see anything. Maybe I overlooked it. Has there been talks of a book, or do you have a book that you've published, or are you an author? Is a fancy way of asking that.
Yeah, it's in the works.
Okay.
We are actively writing a book on the history of the workplace combined with people's needs and how to practically meet people's needs on a day-to-day basis. And that is actually being worked on right now. So it's coming. So I guess prophetically, thanks for asking.
Yeah, I thought there'd be something because I've had it happen before where I've said, I didn't see, and they're like, yeah, I've written 3 books, and I'm like, oh well, I'm an idiot. So I was just hoping I wasn't wrong again, but no, it's good. Is it going to be sort of from the perspective of a leader? Then I assume.
Yeah, it's gonna be from the perspective of like um, in our work, how to lead an organization and a culture where people can thrive.
Okay.
Um, but it's going to start with, so why aren't we thriving?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to get into, okay, what do we need to thrive? And
Mm-hmm.
then the third section would just be, how can I as a leader help somebody thrive? So
Yeah.
that'll be the
So
journey.
what's the you when you say in the works? Are we a year out? Are we 2 months out? What are we
We
thinking?
we are finishing section 3, and so
If there's a
depending on
hundred
which route,
sections, that answers my question. But if there's three
there's three.
sections,
There's three.
okay, all right,
So
good,
that should answer your question. Then we got
nice.
to make some decisions around what we do from a publishing standpoint. But
Okay,
that's the journey, man.
that's cool. I feel like I've already asked too many questions that you can't answer, but I would ask for the name of the book, but we're gonna keep that one under wraps until it's out and you've got it like copywritten or whatever. But
Yeah,
no, that's good, man. Are you on alone on this, or do you have a team that's writing it?
I've got a woman on my team that's helping me write it, pull examples together.
Okay.
She is awesome and has picked up my voice, and so I'm getting some help with it.
It's good, man. I'm looking forward to that. It's kind of exciting. We may have to bring you back on middle of next year to talk about it, maybe, and we can go through it and maybe dissect it a little bit. But
It'd be
man,
great.
it's been a good conversation. I mean, it's time has flown. I hope we didn't get too far into your other more important duties that are out
Hey,
there.
not more important. This is good. Uh, even though it took us a while to get it on the calendar, that was my fault. We made it happen, and
It's
it was a
good.
fun conversation. I appreciate it. It was great.
Yeah, there's a
By the way,
lot.
I think I think we should just do a total hot seat next time. Just throw it on the hot
Just
seat. Let's
crazy
ask the most
questions.
difficult questions. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I have probably 10 or 12 here that were super personal that I didn't ask. No, that's not true. That's not true. But I heard you give me a green light. Speaking of green lights, so then next time we'll do a little longer segment of the craziness, unexpected life sentence.
I love it.
All
Yeah,
right,
let's do
cool,
it. That'd be
cool,
great.
man.
Let's do it next time.
I appreciate you. I'll be reaching out again, and keep me posted, I guess, or add me to a mailing list that keeps me updated on the process of the book.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Audience, with that, he's been Chris Allen. We've been Last in Line. Be blessed.